Hey everyone, MeltingMan234 here, and welcome to another episode of Forgotten Media, where I dig up some stuff you may or may not have heard of. Now, a few years ago, I did an episode on cancelled Mario games, along with a few cancelled Donkey Kong games, and a cancelled Yoshi game, as well as Mario's Wacky Worlds, while others were cancelled and reworked into other games, like Super Mario 128 becoming Pikmin. And some of them were just tech demos to show off what the video game console could do, like the Game Boy Advance port of Yoshi's Story. You can tell it's been that long because I'm already growing a beard here. Well, it turns out there's actually more cancelled Mario games. Most of them I didn't know of at the time when I was making that video. So now it's time to cover the other cancelled Mario games. First up on the list is Peach's Castle, that was displayed on May 22nd, 2001. You control this red arrow and venture through Peach's Castle. Some of these locations included a spiral staircase, a theater room, a hangar where an airplane is seen, a room with a giant metal Mario statue, and an empty room with a question mark block that contains an infinite amount of coins. The game was simply made as a tech demo to show off what the GameCube's graphics could do. I can actually see this as becoming an actual game. With its simple point-and-click gameplay, it could have easily been made for the PC. But of course we all know that Nintendo is not that interested in the PC market of gaming. Now it's time for some Virtual Boy games, because there actually are more cancelled Mario games for that console besides Mario Land. First up is a Mario demo that shows a 3D looking Mario, even though to me it looks more like Wario. There's no information other than that it was a tech demo. I don't know, maybe it was going to be an opening title card for a game or something. Next up is a Mario Kart game that was planned for this console, and apparently it was going to be a follow-up to Super Mario Kart. Little is known about this game, and the only time it was mentioned was in a German Nintendo magazine called Big N, and featured an article of cancelled games and listed the Virtual Boy Mario Kart game as one of them. The idea of driving in virtual reality seemed like a cool idea for the time, but considering how most of the games of the Virtual Boy didn't really use its feature with virtual reality, the game could have been passed on as something similar to that Mario Tennis game and whatnot. But yeah, can you imagine trying to drive a go-kart in that virtual reality with black and red textures coming at you at the speed of a go-kart? Yeah, that would definitely cause some headaches. And the other game that was scrapped from the Virtual Boy was a port of Donkey Kong Country 2. The only information I could find on this game was from a Rareware discussion board where somebody asked about a Donkey Kong Country Virtual Boy game, and one of the workers at Rare replied by saying, "It wasn't Donkey Kong Country, it was Donkey Kong Country 2. It didn't get very far. I used to share a house with the bloke who was doing the title screen, though that's probably not the earth-shattering exclusive you were hoping for." Good old Rare. It's a shame that those greedy bastards at Microsoft had to kill you off. While I'm on the topic of failed consoles, let's move over to the Philips CDI. First up is Mario Takes America. The name of it just sounds weird, and the only thing I can think of is that the game was going to be about Mario taking the American continent and then just runs off with it. A former worker of the game stated that Mario Takes America was going to be an educational game and talks about American culture with some 3D platforming and some cinematic cutscenes. So in other words, it was going to be similar to those other educational Mario games, like Mario is Missing, a game that was on geography and technically is Luigi's first game since it predates Luigi's Mansion. Well, since the project was too much to handle, and of course the CDI wasn't selling that well, the game was scrapped. The company that was making the game, Sigma, tried to find other publishers to get the game made. One time they tried to convince Sega to let them use Sonic the Hedgehog, which obviously that didn't work. And then they tried to create a character called Metal, and from the description I was given, he looked similar to Dee Snider from Twisted Sister. But no matter how hard they tried, the game was never completed, and the company filed for bankruptcy. Nowadays, the Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce owns all of the game's data, or at least what's left of it. Yeah, kind of a weird place to store all that video game data. Another CDI game that was scrapped was a Donkey Kong game, and yeah, that's about it. But you can pretty much imagine if there was a Donkey Kong game on the CDI. If it had cheap-looking cutscenes, it would have made the outdated CGI in the Donkey Kong TV show look more appealing. Next up on the list is Face to Mario, a tech demo that was on display for the Nintendo DS. Remember that part in Mario 64 where you get to mess around with Mario's face? Well, that's what Face to Mario is, messing around with Mario's face, as well as messing around with Wario's face.
This was made to show off what the DS could handle with its graphics and touchscreen, but it also could have been an early viewing of the Super Mario 64 remake that was made for the DS. Although the face-pulling feature in the final product isn't as fun as the tech demo. Next up, Super Mario Spikers, a game that was planned to be released for the Wii and was developed by Next Level Games, the same company behind the Mario Striker games. Originally it was going to be called Mario Volleyball, and just as the title says, it was going to be a volleyball game, since that was like the only sport Mario hasn't tackled at that point in time. But then they decided to include some wrestling elements, which mostly came from another cancelled game called WWE Titans Parts Unknown, which was going to be some kind of hybrid of wrestling and magic or something. As for the gameplay for Spikers, the development was just a mess. A handful of different concept arts were made to design stages and other things, but in the end the game was cancelled.
The reason for its cancellation was that Nintendo wasn't that pleased with the game, as it was going against their code of honor. And honestly, the development of the game just went all over the place. First it was going to be this, and then they tried to add in wrestling, and then tried to add in this and that, and blah 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 blah. Makes you think that the developers were high when they were making that game. Well anyway, this next game is a game that I figure would make it onto the list, known as New Super Mario Bros. Mii.
Yeah, this game. New Super Mario Bros. Mii was a game that was showcased at E3 2011 and was made for the Wii U during its unveiling. It featured the Mario Brothers, the blue and yellow Toads, and your own Mii as a playable character. It featured 5 stages, and from what I've heard, it's basically like playing New Super Mario Bros. Wii just with Mii characters. And if you haven't guessed already, the game is an early prototype for New Super Mario Bros. U, which incorporated most of the elements from the tech demo in the final product. And finally, let's end the list with a cancelled Yoshi game. Argonaut Games, who had previously helped Nintendo with making Star Fox on the Super NES, pitched an idea for a 3D platforming Yoshi game, which is very interesting because with all the Yoshi games that Nintendo has made, they've always been 2D platforming games, with the exception of Yoshi's Cookie, which was a puzzle game, and Yoshi's Safari, which was a first-person shooter game. Nintendo rejected the idea, and the relationship with Argonaut was rocky, especially when they decided to cancel Star Fox 2, a game that was already finished and ready to be released.
In the end, a cancelled Yoshi game helped both companies. For Nintendo, they made Super Mario 64, which was greatly influenced by the prototype, while for Argonaut, they took that cancelled prototype and made Croc, Legend of the Gobos. Now, if only I could find the sequel to this game, then maybe I can do an episode of Croc on Forgotten Media. And with that said, that covers all of the cancelled Mario games, or at least ones that are known to have been cancelled as of this year. Some of them were interesting experiments, while others deserve to be cancelled.
Now I'm sure some of you will be wondering, will I make a sequel to my cancelled Sonic the Hedgehog games episode? Well, so far, the only cancelled Sonic games that I missed are Sonic 4 Episode 3, and a Game Boy Advance video that contains Sonic X episodes, but other than that, I'm pretty much up to date for covering all of the cancelled Sonic games. The only time I could make a sequel to it is by talking about the other cancelled Sonic topics, like the cancelled Knuckles Archive volumes, or the cancelled Sonic comic story that was going to give the Sonic Underground series a proper ending. In other words, don't hold your breath for a sequel to that episode.
Well, that wraps up this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is Melting Man 234 signing out.